Hey, welcome back to the show. I'm really happy you're here today.
Me too. This is going to be a good one. I can feel it.
So, today we're talking about something that I think a lot of English learners really need to hear. We're talking about tracking your progress in English.
Oh, yes. This is so important. And I think a lot of people don't really do this. They just study and study, but they never stop to think, wait, am I getting better?
Exactly. And that's the problem, right? You study for weeks, maybe months, and then one day you feel like, I haven't improved at all. But maybe you have. You just can't see it.
That's a really good point. It's like, okay, here's a good example. You know, when you see a child every day, like your own child or a younger brother or sister, you don't notice them getting taller because you see them every single day.
Oh, I love that example. That's so true.
But then someone who hasn't seen that child in a few months comes to visit and they say, wow, you grew so much. And the parents are like, really? I didn't notice.
Right, right. And it's the same with English. You're with yourself every day. You hear your own speaking every day. So you don't notice the small changes.
But those small changes are happening. They really are.
They are. And today we want to talk about how you can actually see those changes, how you can track them, how you can feel good about your progress instead of always feeling frustrated.
Yes, because frustration is such a big problem for English learners. I hear this so much. People say, I've been studying for 2 years and I still can't speak. And I always want to ask them, well, what does can't speak mean exactly?
That's such a good question to ask because can't speak is very vague. It's not specific.
Right. Can you order food at a restaurant in English?
Can you introduce yourself?
Can you understand a simple conversation?
Those are all speaking. Those are all English. So maybe you can do more than you think.
Exactly. The problem is people have this picture in their head of what speaking English looks like, and it's usually like a business meeting or a speech or some very complicated conversation.
Yes, they think fluent English means talking like a news presenter or a professor.
And that's not how most people talk. Even native speakers don't talk like that every day.
That's so true. I mean, when I talk to my friends, I say things like gonna instead of going to. I say wanna instead of want to. My sentences are not perfect.
Nobody's sentences are perfect in real life. Real conversation is messy. It has pauses. People say and you know what I mean.
And that's okay. That's normal. So I think the first thing we need to talk about is setting a realistic idea of what progress looks like.
Yes, progress is not going from zero to perfect. Progress is going from zero to a little better, and then from a little better to better than that.
Step by step.
Step by step, small steps, and every small step counts.
So let's talk about some real practical ways to track your English progress. Because I think a lot of people want to do this, but they don't know how to start.
Okay, so where do you want to start?
Let's start with something very simple, a journal or a diary, just writing things down.
Ah, okay, tell me more because some people might think, I'm not a writer. I don't want to write a diary.
Right, and that's fair. It doesn't have to be like a beautiful diary with long sentences. It can be super simple, like literally 3 sentences a day.
3 sentences. That's it?
That's it to start. Something like, today I learned a new word. The word is curious. It means you want to know about something.
Oh, I like that. That's very low pressure.
Very low pressure. And the key thing is the date. You always write the date because then 3 months later, you can read what you wrote on day one.
And you'll probably notice a difference.
Hopefully, yes. Your sentences will be a little longer, your spelling might be better, you might be using different words, and that shows growth.
That's actually really motivating when I think about it, like keeping evidence of where you started.
Yes, evidence is a great word. You're keeping evidence of your journey. Because when you feel frustrated, you need evidence. You need proof that you are moving forward.
And feelings can lie to you, right? Like your feelings say, I'm not improving, but the evidence says, actually, look at this. 3 months ago, you wrote 3 sentences. Today, you wrote 10.
Exactly. Your feelings are not always telling you the truth about your progress. The journal is telling you the truth.
Okay, so the journal is one way. What else?
Another thing I really like is recording your voice. Just taking your phone, opening the voice recorder, and speaking for 1 or 2 minutes about anything.
Ooh, okay. And I know some people hate hearing their own voice.
So many people hate it. I hate it too, honestly.
Really? Even you?
Even me. When I hear a recording of my own voice, I always think, is that really what I sound like?
I feel that. It always sounds so different than what you hear inside your head.
But you have to do it anyway, because that recording is gold. That recording is the real picture of where you are right now.
And then you do the same thing a few months later.
Yes, record yourself talking about the same topic or just talking freely, and then compare the two recordings. You might hear a difference in your pronunciation, in your confidence, in how fast you speak, and how many pauses you take.
That's really interesting, the pauses, because I think when people are not confident, they pause a lot more, like they're searching for words.
Yes, and as you improve, those pauses get shorter, or you start to find the words faster. And that's real progress, even if you don't notice it in the moment.
Okay, so voice recordings. I really like that idea, and it costs nothing. You just need your phone.
Exactly. Free and easy. No app needed.
What about apps, though? Because I know a lot of English learners use apps, like language learning apps.
Oh, yeah, apps can be great. But I think the problem is that people rely on apps too much. Like the app becomes the only thing they do for English.
Right, they think if they finish all the lessons in the app, they'll be fluent.
And then they finish the app and they still can't have a real conversation.
Because the app is like practice, but it's not the real game.
That's a great way to say it. It's like training in a gym. You lift weights in the gym, but the real test is when you're out in the world using your body.
I like that comparison. So apps can help with vocabulary, with some grammar, with listening to short dialogues, but they shouldn't be your only tool.
Definitely not. And when you use apps, you should also track your progress beyond just the app's score. Because the app will tell you completed this lesson or you got 80%, but that score doesn't always tell you how well you can actually communicate.
So what would you say instead? How do you track real communication ability?
Okay, so one of my favorite ways is what I call the real conversation test. And this is simple. You find a real person to talk to in English, not a teacher, just a person.
Ooh, that sounds scary for some learners.
It is scary, I know, but hear me out. It doesn't have to be a long conversation. It can be very short,
Like, how short?
like ordering a coffee, or asking someone on the street for directions, or chatting with a cashier at a store.
Ah, okay, small interactions. That's actually really smart because those small interactions happen in real life. They're not fake.
Right, and you track how it goes, not with a score, just with a feeling. Did you understand the person? Did they understand you? Did you feel okay during the conversation, or were you panicking inside?
Panicking inside. I feel like a lot of learners know that feeling.
Absolutely. And over time, you want that panic feeling to get smaller and smaller. That's progress. That's real progress.
Okay, so I want to go back to something you said earlier about feelings lying to you because I think this is really important and I want to explore it more.
Sure, yeah, go ahead.
So, a lot of English learners feel stuck, like they feel like they're at the same level for months. But you're saying that feeling might not be accurate.
That's right. There's actually a name for this feeling in learning. Some people call it a plateau. A plateau is when you feel like you're not moving forward, even though you actually are.
So, why does that happen?
Well, think about it this way. At the beginning of learning English, every day feels exciting because you're learning so many new things. New words, new sounds, new patterns. Everything is new. So you feel progress because you're always learning something for the first time.
Okay, yeah, the beginning is exciting like that.
But then, after a while, you know the basics. You've learned a lot of common words. And now the new things you're learning are smaller, more subtle. It's not, I just learned what a verb is. Now it's more like, I just got a little better at knowing when to use this preposition.
Oh, that's a much smaller thing, less obvious.
Much less obvious. So it feels like nothing is happening, but actually, you're learning more complex and more detailed things. That's not nothing. That's actually a higher level of learning.
Wow, okay, that actually makes me feel better just thinking about it. Like, if I feel stuck, maybe it's actually because I've gone past the easy beginner stuff.
Exactly. The plateau often means you've gotten past the basics, which is actually good news.
Okay, so what do you do when you're on that plateau, when you feel stuck?
A few things. First, change what you're doing. If you've been listening to the same kind of podcasts or watching the same kind of shows, try something different. Your brain gets comfortable with the same input. You need to challenge it with something new.
Oh, that's interesting. So, like, if I always watch cooking shows in English, maybe I should try watching a travel show or a comedy or something different.
Yes, different topics, different accents, different styles of speaking. That wakes your brain up again.
What else?
Another thing is to focus on a specific skill for a short time. Instead of just studying English, you say, "This month I'm going to focus on understanding numbers and dates in English."
Ooh, that's very specific.
Very specific. And because it's specific, you can actually measure it. You can say, "Can I now understand when someone says a phone number quickly? Can I catch dates in a conversation?" And when you can do that, you know you improved in that area.
I like the idea of breaking it down like that because getting better at English is so big. It's almost too big to track.
It's too big. You need to make it smaller. More specific goals are easier to track. And when you achieve a small goal, you feel good. And that good feeling keeps you going.
The motivation thing is so real. I think motivation is actually one of the biggest parts of learning English that nobody talks about.
Oh, 100%. You can have the best method, the best teacher, the best app, but if you're not motivated, you're going to quit.
So, how do you keep motivation going, especially when you're on that plateau?
One of the best things I found is to celebrate small wins, like genuinely celebrate them. Not just "oh, okay, I learned this word, moving on," but actually acknowledge it, feel proud of it.
Can you give an example of a small win?
Sure. So let's say last week you were watching a movie in English and there was a sentence you didn't understand at all. You had to rewind it 5 times. But this week you watched a similar scene in a different movie and you understood it the first time.
Oh, that's a great small win.
That's huge, actually. That's a real improvement in your listening comprehension. But most people just move on and don't even notice that moment.
Because they're focused on everything they still don't understand.
Exactly. They hear one sentence they don't understand and they think, "See, I'm still bad at this." But they forget the 10 sentences they understood just fine.
The negativity bias thing. Our brains remember the bad stuff more than the good stuff.
Yes, and for English learners, that's dangerous because if your brain is always focused on what you can't do, you'll always feel bad. You have to actively look for what you can do.
That's actually good life advice, not just English advice.
Honestly, yes, a lot of this stuff applies to any kind of learning or growth. English is just a specific example.
Okay, so we've talked about journals, voice recordings, real conversations, specific goals, small wins. What's another way to chalk progress?
Okay, here's one that I really like, and I think it's underused. It's called a vocabulary notebook, but not just any vocabulary notebook, a special one.
Ooh, tell me what makes it special.
So, most people write vocabulary lists like this: word definition, just a long list. And that's fine, but it's not very useful for tracking progress.
Right, because a list just shows you what you wrote down. It doesn't show you what you actually know.
Exactly. So the special version is you write the word, yes, you write a simple definition, but then you also write a personal example sentence, a sentence from your own life.
Oh, interesting. Why from your own life?
Because it makes the word real for you. It connects the word to something you actually know and care about. And those connections make words stick in your memory much better.
Okay, can you give me an example?
Sure. So let's say the word is exhausted. You write the definition, very, very tired. And then, instead of a random example sentence, you write something like, after my shift at the restaurant on Friday night, I was exhausted.
Because that's a real experience from your life.
And now that word is connected to a real memory, a real feeling. So next time you're exhausted, that word comes to your mind.
That's really smart. Okay, so that's the vocabulary part, but how does this help with tracking progress?
Good question. So, what you do is every month or every few weeks, you go back to words you wrote earlier and you test yourself. Can you still remember the definition? Can you still use the word in a sentence? And importantly, have you heard or used this word in real life since you wrote it?
Oh, that last one is interesting. Have you actually used it?
Yes, because that's the real test. If you wrote exhausted 2 months ago, have you actually said, I'm exhausted to someone? Have you heard it in a podcast or a movie? If yes, that word has become part of your active vocabulary. That's real progress.
And if you haven't used it or heard it at all?
Then maybe it wasn't a very useful word for your life. And that's okay too. You learn what kinds of words come up in your daily life, and those are the ones to focus on.
I love that. Progress isn't just about knowing more words, it's about knowing the right words for your life.
Exactly, because a business person needs different vocabulary than a student. A person who loves cooking needs different words than someone who loves sports. English is not one size fits all.
So, personalizing your learning is actually a way to improve faster.
I believe so, yes. When the language is relevant to your life, you learn it faster and you remember it better.
Okay, this is making me think about something. We've been talking about tracking progress, but what are the signs that you're actually progressing? Like, what are things a learner might notice that show they're getting better?
Oh, that's a great question. Let me think about a few good ones.
Take your time.
Okay, so one big sign is when you start thinking in English, not translating in your head, but actually thinking in English directly.
Ooh, can you explain what you mean?
So, when most people start learning a language, their brain works like this. They think in their first language, then translate to English, then speak.
Right, and that's slow, and it makes you pause a lot because you're doing two things at once.
Exactly. But at some point, if you keep practicing, your brain starts to skip the translation step. You just think in English directly.
And that's a huge sign of progress.
It's enormous because now your brain is treating English as a real language, not just a code to translate.
When does that happen? Like at what level?
It's different for everyone, but I will say it often starts small, like you're washing dishes and a simple thought comes to you in English. This water is cold, and you didn't translate it, it just came.
Oh, wow, that's a beautiful moment, actually.
It really is, and a lot of learners don't even notice it when it first happens because it's so small. But pay attention to those moments. They're signs that the language is becoming a part of your mind.
That's lovely. What are some other signs?
Another one is when you start dreaming in English.
Oh, I've heard people talk about this.
Have you?
Yes, some learners say, I had a dream in English last night, and they're always so excited about it.
And they should be, because your brain is processing English even when you're asleep. That means English is truly getting into your subconscious.
The deep storage.
The deep storage, yes. If English is in your dreams, it's in your deep storage.
That's a fun way to think about it. Okay, what else?
Another sign is when you start noticing mistakes, not your own mistakes, but mistakes in others. Like you're watching a show and a character says something a little unusual in English, and you think, wait, that sounds a bit off.
Oh, really? So noticing errors is a sign of progress.
Yes, because it means your ear is getting trained. Your brain has built a kind of internal model of how English should sound, and when something doesn't match that model, you notice.
Interesting. So it's like your brain is becoming a filter.
A really good way to put it. Your brain becomes an English filter, and the better your English, the finer that filter becomes.
Okay, what about in conversation? What signs show progress in actual speaking?
Big one. When you stop apologizing before you speak. You know what I mean?
Oh, yes. When people say, sorry, my English is not very good before every single thing they say.
Right. And I understand why people do that. It's to protect themselves. It's like saying, please don't judge me too harshly.
It's a defense.
It's a defense. But as you get more comfortable and more confident, you start to just speak. You don't apologize first. You just say what you want to say.
And that's a sign of confidence, which is a sign of progress.
Yes, confidence and ability are connected. When your ability grows, your confidence usually grows too. Not always at the same speed, but they grow together.
But what about people who have the ability but still lack confidence? That happens too, right?
Absolutely. I've met learners who speak really well, but they're terrified to open their mouth because they've had bad experiences. Maybe someone laughed at their accent or corrected them rudely, or they failed a test.
Oh, that's so painful. Those experiences can really damage your confidence.
They can. And for those people, tracking progress is extra important because they need the evidence. They need to be able to say, I know I'm good because look, here is my journal from 3 months ago, and here is my journal now. Look how far I've come.
The evidence as a confidence builder. I really like that.
Evidence is stronger than feelings. Feelings can be wrong. Evidence doesn't lie.
You know, I want to talk about something a little different now. We've been talking about how to track progress, but I want to talk about how not to track progress, like the ways that people track progress that actually don't help.
Ooh, yes, this is important. Let's do it.
Okay, so the big one for me is comparing yourself to native speakers.
Oh, yes, this is such a trap.
It's a huge trap, and I see this so often. Someone is doing really well in English, they're improving, but then they watch a native speaker on YouTube talking super fast with slang and jokes, and they think, I'll never sound like that. I'm a failure.
And that's not a fair comparison at all. That native speaker has spoken English every single day for their entire life, maybe 30 years. You've been studying for 2 years. Of course it's different.
It's like comparing a 30-year-old professional chef to someone who just started cooking. It's not the right comparison.
Not even close. You should compare yourself to where you were before, not to someone else.
The only competition is with yourself, your past self.
I love that. Your past self. That's who you're competing with. Not a native speaker, not your classmate, not anyone else.
What's another bad way to track progress?
Another is test scores, relying only on test scores.
Explain that more, because some people might push back and say, but tests are objective, right? They're fair.
Tests measure certain things. They measure grammar knowledge, they measure vocabulary, they might measure reading comprehension, but they don't measure your ability to have a real conversation. They don't measure your confidence. They don't measure how fast you can process spoken English.
So you can fail a test and still be a good communicator.
Definitely. And you can pass a test and still struggle to have a simple conversation.
That's so true. I've met people who have certificates and qualifications in English, but put them in a real conversation and they freeze.
Because the test was in a very controlled environment. Real language is messy and fast and unpredictable. Tests can't really measure that.
So tests can be one tool, but they shouldn't be the only measure.
Right. Use the test as one data point, not the whole picture.
What else do people use to track progress that's not very helpful?
I think this one is a bit unexpected, but I think the number of hours studied.
Oh, interesting. Tell me why.
So people say things like, I've studied English for 500 hours, and they use that number as a measure of how good their English should be. But two people can study for 500 hours and have very different results.
Because the quality of those hours matters.
Exactly. 500 hours of just doing grammar exercises is very different from 500 hours of listening to real English, speaking, reading interesting things, and having real conversations.
So it's not about time, it's about what you do with the time.
Quality over quantity, always.
Okay, I want to come back to something. We talked earlier about voice recordings as a way to track progress, and I want to dig into that more because I think it's really powerful.
Sure, yeah.
So let's say someone does this. They record themselves today. What should they say? What's a good thing to talk about when you record yourself?
Great question. I usually suggest picking a topic that's personal and easy to talk about, something you know well. So it could be your job, your daily routine, your hometown, your hobbies.
Because if you pick a topic that's too hard, you won't know if the problem is your English or just that you don't know enough about the topic.
Exactly right. Keep the topic simple so you're testing your language, not your knowledge of the topic.
Smart. So, what do you say, like for 2 minutes, just talk about your morning routine?
Yes, that's a perfect one. Just describe your morning. I wake up at 7, I drink coffee, I take a shower, I take the bus to work. Simple, but it's real.
And then 3 months later, you do the same thing, describe your morning, and compare.
And you'll probably hear a difference. Maybe your pronunciation of certain words is clearer. Maybe you're using more connecting words like first and then and after that. Maybe your voice sounds more relaxed and less nervous.
Oh, the voice thing is interesting because when you're nervous, your voice sounds a certain way, right? Tighter, higher maybe.
Yes, and as you get more comfortable with English, your voice naturally relaxes. It sounds more natural, more like you.
Like the language is fitting you better.
Yes, like a pair of shoes that you've worn in. At first, they're stiff and uncomfortable, but after wearing them for a while, they fit your feet perfectly.
I love that. English as a pair of shoes you need to break in.
And you have to actually wear them to break them in. You can't just look at them.
You have to use the language to make it comfortable.
That's the whole point, isn't it?
Okay, let's talk about another thing. What about people who are learning English, but they don't live in an English-speaking country? How do they track progress when they don't have many opportunities to use real English?
This is such a real issue. I think a lot of our listeners are probably in this situation.
Most of them, maybe.
So, first, I want to say this is a challenge, but it's not impossible. We have the internet. We have so much English content available to us.
More than any generation before.
Exactly. 20 years ago, if you were in, say, Thailand or Brazil or Ukraine, and you wanted to hear real English conversations, your options were very limited. Maybe some imported movies or textbooks.
Now you can watch any movie, any show, any YouTube channel, any podcast in English anytime you want.
For free, mostly. So the access is there. The challenge is how to use it.
Okay, so for tracking progress specifically, what would you recommend for someone who doesn't have many real English conversations in their daily life?
One great tool is online conversation partners. There are apps and websites where you can find someone who wants to learn your language and you help each other. They practice your language, you practice their language.
Like a language exchange.
Yes, language exchange. And it's free, it's fun, and it's real conversation with a real person.
And you can track how those conversations go over time.
Definitely. You can keep a simple log. After each conversation, write one sentence. Today, I understood most of what my partner said. Or, today, I got stuck when we talked about past tense verbs. Just one sentence. That's your progress log.
Short and simple. I like it.
It doesn't have to be complicated. The important thing is just to have some record so you can look back and see patterns.
Patterns, that's interesting. What kind of patterns would you look for?
Well, you might notice that you always struggle with a certain type of conversation. Like maybe you're fine talking about daily life, but when the conversation gets more abstract, like talking about ideas or opinions, you get stuck.
And knowing that helps you know what to work on next.
Yes, your struggles are data. They're telling you where to go next.
I like that. Struggles as data, not failures. Data.
Failures is such a heavy word. Data is neutral. It just says, here's what's happening. What do you want to do about it?
That's a much healthier mindset.
Much healthier. And I think mindset is actually one of the most underrated parts of language learning. I want to talk about this more.
Yes, please.
So, there are two kinds of mindsets that people can have when learning English. One is what I call the fixed mindset. This person thinks, I'm just not good at languages. Some people are naturally good at English, and I'm not one of them.
Oh, I've heard people say this. I have a bad ear for language, or I can't do accents.
Right. And this mindset is very limiting because it removes your agency. It says the outcome is already decided. You're either a language person or you're not.
And the other mindset?
The growth mindset. This person thinks, I might not be good at English right now, but if I practice, I can improve. Skills can be developed.
And that mindset opens the door.
It opens every door. Because if you believe you can improve, you're willing to try. You're willing to make mistakes. You're willing to look silly sometimes in order to get better.
And making mistakes is so important.
So important. Every mistake is a lesson, honestly. Every time you say the wrong word or the wrong tense and someone doesn't understand you or gently corrects you, that's a learning moment.
But people are so afraid of those moments.
I know, and I understand why. Being misunderstood in English can feel embarrassing, especially in front of other people.
Can you share a personal story about this? A time you made a mistake in another language?
Oh, yes, I have a good one. So, I was trying to learn Spanish a few years ago, and I was in a restaurant and I wanted to say that I was embarrassed about something, and I thought I knew the word. I said, Estoy embarazada.
Oh no, do you know what that means?
I said, I am pregnant. Estoy embarazada means I am pregnant, not embarrassed.
Oh, that's a classic mistake. And the waiter?
The waiter was a woman and she looked very confused and then she started laughing and then I realized what I had said and I started laughing and it was actually a wonderful moment.
Because she was kind about it.
She was very kind and that mistake, I will never forget it. I will never confuse those two words again. The mistake taught me better than any textbook could.
The embarrassing memories are the ones that stick.
They really do. So if you make a mistake, try to laugh about it, or at least learn from it. Don't just feel ashamed and give up.
That's such good advice. Okay, so I want to bring this back around to tracking progress because we've talked about a lot of things now. Let me try to summarize what we've covered and you can add anything I miss.
Go ahead.
So we said that tracking progress is important because without it, you can't see how far you've come. And not seeing your progress can lead to frustration and giving up.
Right.
We talked about keeping a journal, writing even just a few sentences a day, with the date.
Yes.
Recording your voice and comparing recordings over time. Using a personal vocabulary notebook. Having real conversations, even short ones, and noticing how they go.
All of those, yes.
We talked about signs of progress, like thinking in English, dreaming in English, noticing mistakes in others and becoming less nervous in conversations.
Beautiful summary.
And we talked about bad ways to track progress, comparing to native speakers, relying only on test scores, and counting study hours without thinking about quality.
That's the big picture, yes. I would add one more thing.
What is it?
So, like we said at the beginning, it's hard to see your own progress because you're with yourself every day. But if you have an old friend or a teacher or a language partner who hasn't talked to you for a few months, they can often see the change very clearly.
Like the "you've grown so tall" thing from the beginning.
Exactly. An outside perspective can be incredibly motivating. Someone tells you, your English is so much better than last year, and suddenly you feel 10 feet tall.
Because they're seeing the change that you can't see.
And that's real. That's not flattery. That's a real observation from someone who has a reference point.
So don't be afraid to ask for that feedback.
Don't be afraid. You can just say, do you think my English has improved since we started talking? And most people will be happy to give you an honest answer.
And if they say, not much, honestly, what do?
You thank them for being honest, and you use that as information. Maybe you need to change your approach. Maybe you need to practice different things, but you don't give up.
Never give up.
Never. Because the only way to fail at learning English is to stop trying. If you keep going, you will get there. It just takes time.
I feel like we should say that again because it's really important.
The only way to fail is to stop trying. If you keep going, you will improve. It is guaranteed.
Guaranteed.
Language learning is not like a lottery. It's not random. If you put in real practice, real listening, real speaking, you will improve. It is a law.
Like gravity, it's a law. You drop something, it falls. You practice English consistently, you get better.
I love that comparison.
Okay, I also want to touch on something that I think is really relevant to the people listening, which is how do you stay motivated during the long periods when progress feels slow?
The plateau again.
The plateau. And I know we talked about it a bit, but I want to get more practical.
Like, what do you actually do on a bad day when you feel like you've been studying for months and you're still stuck?
Okay, so first thing, give yourself permission to feel frustrated. Don't fight that feeling. It's normal. Everyone who learns a language feels this way at some point, even multiple times.
You're allowed to feel frustrated.
You are. And then, after you've allowed yourself to feel that, do one small thing. Just one.
One small thing?
One small thing. Watch a short video in English, read 5 sentences of an English article, listen to one song and try to catch 2 words you understand. Just one small thing.
Because it keeps the habit alive.
Exactly. Habits are like fires. If you stop feeding them, even for a short time, they go out. But if you keep even a tiny flame going, you can build it back up.
So on a bad day, don't quit. Just do something tiny.
Something tiny is enough. And then tomorrow, maybe you do a little more. And the day after, a little more. And slowly, you're back on track.
That's such a manageable approach. I think people sometimes think it has to be all or nothing, like I either study for 2 hours today or I skip it completely.
And that all or nothing thinking is the enemy of consistency. Consistency is the most important thing in language learning.
More important than intensity?
Much more important. I'd rather see someone do 10 minutes of English every day than someone who studies for 4 hours on weekends and nothing during the week.
Because the daily exposure keeps your brain active in the language.
Your brain needs regular exposure, like watering a plant. A little water every day is better than a big flood once a week.
The plant will die with the flood approach.
Eventually, yes. But with regular, gentle watering, it grows steadily.
I love that. English as a plant you're growing.
Every day, a little water.
Okay, let's talk about one more thing before we wrap up. I want to talk about celebrating progress because I feel like a lot of learners, when they finally achieve something, they just move on to the next goal. They don't stop to appreciate what they've done.
Oh, this is so important. And I'm guilty of this too. You achieve something and your brain immediately says, okay, now what's next? Without pausing to enjoy the moment.
Why do we do that?
I think it's because we're always focused on the gap between where we are and where we want to be. And that gap can feel very motivating, but it can also make you feel like you're never there.
You're always chasing.
Always chasing, and that can be exhausting. So it's healthy to occasionally look backwards instead of forwards and say, look at how far I've come.
How do you do that, practically speaking?
Well, we've already talked about the journal and the voice recordings. Those are perfect for looking back. But I'd also suggest a small ritual. Like at the end of every month, you take 10 minutes and you think about or write down 3 things you can do in English now that you couldn't do at the beginning of the month.
3 things.
Just 3. It doesn't have to be big. I can now understand the price when a cashier tells me in English. That's 1. I watched a 10-minute video in English and I understood most of it. That's 2. I wrote an email in English and the person understood me and replied. That's 3.
Those are 3 real, tangible things.
And they matter. They're evidence of real improvement. And when you write them down and read them, your brain gets a signal. I am moving forward. I am making progress.
And that signal is what keeps you going.
That's the fuel. That's the fuel that keeps the engine running.
That's beautiful. I think that's a really wonderful note to start wrapping up on.
I agree.
So, to everyone who's been listening today, I hope this conversation has been helpful, and I hope you feel a little more motivated to think about your own progress, not just to study, but to track, to notice, to celebrate.
Because you are improving, even if you can't see it right now. Even if today was a hard day, you are moving forward. Every time you listen to English, every time you try to speak it, every time you read a sentence or write a word, you are moving forward.
One step at a time.
One step at a time. And those steps add up. They really do.
I want to leave our listeners with one final thought. If you do nothing else after listening to today's episode, Do this one thing. Find your phone, open the voice recorder, and record yourself for 2 minutes talking about your day. Just 2 minutes. Then save it with today's date.
And then in 3 months, do it again. Compare the two recordings.
And listen for the difference, because I promise you the difference will be there.
It will be there.
Thanks so much for listening today. We hope you enjoyed this conversation.
And we hope your English journey is going well. You're doing better than you think.
You really are. See you next time.
See you next time. Take care, everyone.